Welcome to Multilateral Thinking, your independent view of global trade. I'm joined here with Rebecca Harding, who is, of course, the CEO of Coriolis Technologies. Now, next week, the whole world will be watching the US presidential election, which takes place, of course, on Tuesday, 3rd November. Rebecca, so many things to reflect upon within the Trump presidency, but looking at this particularly from a trade and a geopolitical view, how would you assess the US's position on the world over the past 4 years in terms of its relationship with global institutions and its relationship with other countries and blocs?
So I think the really interesting thing here is that the US election is all about trust in itself, and the way in which the world has changed its perception of the US over the last few years has really been to examine the role that the US has played in those global institutions as the world's global policeman, if you like. And to some extent, a lot of that has been undermined by the rather cavalier way in which the US has gone about detaching itself from a lot of global organizations like the World Trade Organization, like the World Health Organization, like the Paris Climate Accord. And of course, a lot of this is around the Make America Great agenda, and that hasn't actually changed very much in terms of jobs coming back to the US or the deficit with China, or indeed the role of China as a global superpower. So to some extent, what's happened over the last 4 years is the US seems to have withdrawn from its role as a global policeman, and that's undermined the world's trust in its participation in some of these multilateral organizations.
So come Tuesday, Wednesday morning, and if indeed we do see another 4 years of President Trump, and most commentators suggest that will be without overall control of Congress, what should we expect? More of the same, more aggressive?
So, I mean, in a way, that's a nightmare scenario, isn't it? Because a Trump presidency without overall control of Congress has the potential to create a gridlock. However, in trade terms, believe it or not, it's not likely to make that much difference, because the president himself has the right to set trade negotiations with the trade negotiator, the US Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer, and a lot of those negotiations and the negotiating stance of the US goes through the president's office. So it's not until an agreement is actually reached that Congress gets involved. So what that means is that we're likely to see a sustained long distance relationship with the World Trade Organization, a lot of pressure to do things outside of the World Trade Organization, and more of the same in terms of the aggression towards China, ramping up of rhetoric towards China and China's hegemony in the technology space, or increasing hegemony. So these are all things that we have to be very worried about, I think.
But let's dwell upon the polls themselves. They're very much in favour for Biden at the moment as we speak. If these early indications are fulfilled, what would you expect from a Biden administration?
So again, as you say, we have to be very careful in interpreting polls, because we've been here before, and there's still a feeling like we might not get the Biden presidency. However, markets are pricing it in, and the European Union is beginning to put together negotiating positions in terms of its relationship with the US. So what that would look like in terms of the global position of the United States is that we would get a much more conciliatory tone, a much more emollient tone towards global institutions like the World Trade Organization. Biden is a multilateralist, but underneath everything, it's very likely that the mantra, which is very much economic security is national security. So underneath everything, it's unlikely that a huge amount will change. Just to say on the European Union, I think there's something very positive that could come out of there, because that is actually top of the agenda in terms of recalibrating some of the global relationships that the United States has had. And Biden has a very strong emphasis on the environment and sustainability in his policies. So what I think is likely to happen is that he might start using tariffs as a trigger to incentivizing companies to be more sustainable. And he might work with the European Union rather than completely recalibrating the TTIP agreements or anything like that, he might actually work with the European Union to do something really meaningful around sustainability, and that will be a really big win.
Finally, in the event of a Biden presidency, where the language and the tone is far more conciliatory, as you say, Rebecca, and more so about partnership, to what extent do you think the past 4 years have undermined America's reputation and stewardship as a global leader?
I think the world needs to have its trust restored in America's commitment to the multilateral world of trade. I think Biden has a mountain to climb, and the trouble is that he's got to unravel tariffs, he's got to make trade become business as usual again, rather than a tool of foreign policy and a politicized weapon, if you like. So I think he has an absolute mountain to climb. His mantra at the moment is restoring people's trust in America's leadership. So let's hope that he has an agenda to go, but let's also be absolutely clear that strategic competition between China and the US is here to stay.
Excellent. We will see what happens next week, Rebecca. Thank you.
Thank you.